These are the worst punishments in ancient civilizations. Scaphism, ancient Persia. Imagine you're a soldier captured near the Tigris River in 401 BC. You're expecting to be killed by a sword. Instead, you hear them mention boats. You laugh it off. In reality, you are actually in for one of the most disgusting experiences imaginable. The punishment starts off sweet. They hold your head back and pour milk and honey down your throat. After that, things get considerably less comfortable. They lay you inside a wooden boat and bind you in place. A second boat is lowered on top like a lid, leaving only your arms, legs, and head sticking through cut holes. Someone smears milk and honey across every inch of your exposed skin. They carry you to the nearest swamp, set you afloat on the still water, and walk away. In a matter of minutes, the honey pulls in wasps, bees, and flies. They land on every sticky exposed inch, and they sting and bite without stopping. All that forced milk and honey triggers diarrhea plus vomiting. The waste builds up beneath you, warm and dark, perfect for maggots to breed in. Within days, they've worked their way into your flesh. Some make it into your intestines. They're eating you from the inside while the insects handle the outside. Every day, the guards come back to check on you. They pull you from the swamp and force enough milk and honey down your throat, just enough to keep your body running, not enough to make any of this bearable. By day 4 or 5, your skin is raw and swollen from thousands of stings and bites that literally never stop. Your stomach cramps so hard your whole body just seizes around it. The fever makes everything blur. You can't tell if it's day or night. Can't track how long you've been out there. And can't think about anything clearly except that every single part of you hurts in a completely different way at the exact same time. You're completely exhausted and dehydrated, but you can't sleep because the biting is constant. The sword you were so afraid of at the beginning starts to feel like the considerate option. What you just walked through has a name. The Greeks called it Scaphism, from a word meaning hollowed boat. And the milk, the honey, the floating coffin, the slow rot in the sun, that's the whole punishment. The Greek historian Plutarch recorded one real case. A Persian soldier named Mithridates was sentenced to Scaphism after drunkenly boasting that he, not the king, had been the one to kill Cyrus the Younger. He survived in the boat for 17 days. That's basically 408 hours. The breaking wheel. Medieval Europe. It's a market day in 16th century Germany. There's a crowd, there's noise, and you're being dragged onto a wooden platform in the middle of it. In the center of that platform, lying flat on its side, is a heavy wagon wheel. They lay you across it on your back. They tie your arms out along 2 of the spokes and your legs out along 2 of the others. Then the executioner walks up, holding an iron bar the length of a man's leg. You watch him raise it. You watch him aim. The first blow comes down on your forearm. The sound you hear is your own bone snapping. Then comes the pain, half a second later, like a delayed explosion crawling up your arm into your skull. The bone is shattered, and the jagged pieces are tearing into the muscles and nerves around it. Your fingers twitch on their own. You can't make them stop. He moves on. The next blow falls on your shin, then your thigh, then your other forearm, then the other shin. He's working methodically, one limb at a time, and none of these blows are meant to kill you. They're meant to destroy you, piece by piece, while leaving your vital organs untouched so you stay awake for every single one. By the 4th or 5th break, you stop being able to scream properly. Your throat just makes sounds. Your arms and legs feel wrong in a way you didn't know was possible, like bags of broken stones loosely held together by skin. When the executioner lifts one of your arms, it bends in places that aren't joints. Then he starts threading your shattered limbs through the spokes of the wheel, weaving your broken body into it. Your arms and legs go where bones aren't supposed to bend. And now, you're not just on a wheel, you're part of it. A broadsheet printed in Hamburg in 1607 described a man left like this as a giant screaming puppet. Limbs woven through the spokes like the arms of some sea creature. Raw flesh and smashed bone tangled together. They hoist the wheel up onto a tall pole and stand it upright in the town square, with you laced into it. The crowd can see you from a distance. So can the birds. You're not dead, and that's the worst part. The killing blows would have been a mercy. Instead, you're going to hang up there for hours, maybe days, while your body slowly goes into shock and the damaged tissue starts to fail. There's one recorded case of a man surviving on the wheel for 9 days before he finally died. If the court has decided to show you mercy, the executioner will deliver what's called the coup de grace, a few crushing hits to the chest, ending it within minutes. If they haven't, you wait. This is also where the wheel got its other name. In the early 300s, a Christian woman named Catherine of Alexandria was sentenced to die on the wheel for refusing to give up her faith. As the legend goes, the moment she touched it, The wheel shattered on its own, so they beheaded her instead. She became a saint, and ever since, the device has also been called the Catherine wheel. A German farmer named Peter Stump was broken on the wheel in 1589. A French bandit named Cartouche also got it in 1721 in front of a huge crowd. Archaeologists have actually dug up skeletons with the exact pattern of breaks you'd expect. The wheel was still being used in parts of Europe right up into the 1800s. The last recorded execution by wheel was in Prussia in 1841. Lingchi, Imperial China. You're being tied to a wooden post in a public square. The crowd is already there, gathered around you in a circle. You've been convicted of a crime so serious, treason perhaps, or killing your own parent, that the law has decided you don't deserve to die in one piece. A man walks toward you holding a small, very sharp knife. He doesn't look angry, he looks focused, the way a tailor looks focused, because for him, this is his craft. His job is to keep you alive and conscious for as long as possible while he removes you from yourself piece by piece. He starts at your chest. The first cut is deep. He carves away a wide section of flesh from your left side, exposing the muscle and rib beneath. You don't scream the way you expected to. The shock is too big for that. Then he moves to your right side and does the same thing. Now the bones of your rib cage are visible. You can see them moving as you breathe. After your chest, the executioner moves to your arms, a deep section from your bicep, then your forearm, then your legs. Your major organs are deliberately untouched. Death is supposed to come last, when the knife finally goes into your heart. And there was a tipping system. If your family had money, they could pay the executioner before the day began. The cheapest payment bought you a blindfold, so you wouldn't have to watch. The next level up was opium, dulling the pain. The most expensive option was the one everyone wanted. The executioner would skip the slow part entirely and drive the knife straight into your heart with the first cut. Everything after would be done to a corpse. If you were full, you got the full version. The punishment was used in China from around the 10th century AD until 1905. Cut counts varied by dynasty. Yuan records suggest around 100 cuts. The Ming sometimes called for 3,000. Some emperors demanded a death lasting up to 3 days. The practice ended because of a camera. A slave named Fu Zhuli was sentenced to Lingchi for killing his master, a Mongol prince. On April 10, French soldiers in the crowd photographed the entire execution. The images show his chest opened, his arms reduced to bone, his legs hollowed out, and yet his head still upright, still alive. The photos spread across Europe and America. The shock was enormous. Months later, the Qing government formally abolished Lingchi by imperial decree. After nearly 2,000 years, the practice was officially over. Crucifixion, ancient Rome. Imagine you're a slave in the Roman Empire in around 70 AD. You took part in a rebellion. It failed, and now you're standing in front of a Roman magistrate who has just finished writing one word on the tablet in front of him. And that word is crux, meaning the cross. Before anything else, they flog you. And a Roman flogging is not what most people imagine when they hear the word. The instrument is called a flagrum. It's not one strip of leather, but several weighted tails, often fitted with iron and bone. In the hands of a trained soldier, it is designed to weaken you before the real punishment begins. By the time it ends, you have lost blood, your strength is fading, and standing upright is already difficult. Then they make you carry the patibulum, or crossbeam. It's the horizontal part of the cross. It still weighs roughly 75 to 125 pounds, and you carry it through the city streets on your injured back. The upright post was often already fixed at the execution site. At the execution site, they throw you down onto the beam. Most people imagine nails going through the palms, but the palms cannot support the weight of a human body. The tissues would tear. Instead, the nails are driven through the wrists, through a small gap between the carpal bones known as destot space, strong enough to hold the body's weight. Your feet are then fixed to the wood below, and only then does the dying begin. In this position, your arms are stretched out and your body hangs from your chest, locking it in an expanded position. Breathing becomes a lot of work and pain. To exhale, you have to push up with your legs and feet just enough for the diaphragm to move. Every breath demands effort, and your body is already weakened from the flogging and the walk through the city. The longer you hang, the harder it becomes. Your muscles tire from the constant struggle to breathe. Eventually, you can no longer push yourself up. When that happens, you can no longer exhale properly. And when you can no longer breathe, you begin to suffocate. It can take hours or days. The soldiers posted at the cross are there to make sure no one cuts you down too soon. When they want to speed up the process, they break the victim's legs. Without the strength to push upward, breathing fails quickly. The Romans did not invent crucifixion. The Persians, Carthaginians, and Assyrians all had earlier versions of it. But Rome did something different. Rome systematized it. After the slave rebellion led by Spartacus in 71 BC, the Roman general Crassus crucified 6,000 surviving rebels along the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome. One cross stood roughly every 35 meters, stretching all the way towards the city. You could travel from the battlefield to the capital and never be out of sight of a crucified man. Crassus left them there. Rome did not have a problem with cruelty. Rome had a talent for it. Buried alive. Ancient Rome. You're one of the Vestal Virgins, 6 women in all of Rome who tend the sacred flame of the goddess Vesta, a fire that is never, ever supposed to go out, because the entire city believes that Rome itself depends on it. You have huge privileges no other Roman woman has. You can own property. You sit in the front row at the games. People treat you with awe. But you took a vow at the start of your 30 years of service. You promised to remain a virgin, and now you've been accused of breaking that vow. Whether you actually did it doesn't matter. The accusation is enough. They lead you out through the streets of Rome with a crowd watching. You can't speak in your own defense. Your hands are bound. The procession winds out past the city walls to a place called the Campus Sceleratus, which translates literally to the evil field. Already dug into the ground there is a small underground chamber, and standing beside it is a ladder leading down into the dark. Here's the cold trick of it. Roman law says you can't spill the blood of a Vestal. It's forbidden. So how do they execute a woman whose blood they're not allowed to shed? They came up with a loophole so chilling, it's almost impressive. Inside the chamber, they placed a couch, a small oil lamp, a bit of bread, a jug of water, a little milk and oil. They aren't killing you, you see. They're just leaving you in a room. Technically, you're alive when they seal the entrance. Whatever happens to you down there, the dark, the slow choking on bad air, the eventual silence, isn't their doing. The gods can decide. The senators can sleep at night. You climb down the ladder, they pull it up after you. Then you hear the entrance being filled in above you. Earth on stone, then more earth. And the sounds fade because the seal is thickening. And finally, there's nothing. You're alone with a flame and a piece of bread, in a hole that the city has agreed doesn't exist. The lamp flickers. You watch it because it's the only thing moving. You count your breaths because there's nothing else to count. The air, you start to notice, is getting heavier. The flame is getting smaller. You don't know if the flame is dying because the air is running out, or if you're dying because the air is running out, or if it's both at the same speed, and you simply won't notice when one of you stops. The most famous case is a senior priestess named Cornelia, who was condemned by the Emperor Domitian around 90 AD. The writer Pliny the Younger lived at that time, and in a letter to a friend, he quietly mentioned that he thought she was actually innocent, accused for political reasons. As they led her down into the chamber, she maintained her innocence right up to the moment they sealed the entrance. The Blood Eagle, Viking Age, Scandinavia. You're face down in the dirt with your hands tied behind your back. A man with a knife is kneeling on your spine. According to the Norse sagas, what happens next goes like this. He cuts a long line down each of your spine, opening up the skin of your back. Then he takes a blade and starts chopping off each of your ribs away from the backbone, one by one, working down both sides. Then he reaches in and pries your ribs outward and backward, spreading them open like a pair of wings. And finally, he pulls your lungs out through the openings and drapes them over the spread ribs. The grisly poetic image, the one that gives this its name, is that as you take your final breaths, the lungs sprayed on your back twitch and flutter, like the wings of an eagle. And then, the whole arrangement is offered up as a sacrifice to Odin. It is one of the most horrifying things ever described in any language. The question is whether anyone ever actually did it. For a long time, scholars dismissed the Blood Eagle as pure myth. There's no archaeological evidence of it. The Vikings didn't write things down at the time. They passed down spoken poetry, and the sagas that described the Blood Eagle were finally written down hundreds of years later, by which point storytellers had every reason to embellish. The most famous victim, a king named Ella of Northumbria, supposedly killed by the sons of Ragnar in revenge, comes to us wrapped in a legend so thick you can barely see through it. There are really only about 4 mentions of the ritual in all of Norse literature, and every one is tied to vengeance between high-status enemies. But in 2022, a team including medical experts looked at the anatomy of it. Their question was simple. Could you even physically do this to a human body? Their answer was surprising. Technically, yes. You could perform each of the steps described, but the moment you open the chest cavity that way, the lungs collapse and the victim is dead within seconds. The fluttering wings part, where the victim is still alive while their splayed lungs move with their last breaths, is biologically impossible. The dramatic image at the heart of the legend isn't an exaggeration of something that happened. It's something that couldn't happen. So put the picture back together. Some kind of brutal eagle-shaped mutilation may have happened at least once in the Viking Age, possibly to a corpse, possibly to a dying man. And from that one act, a story grew. By the time the sagas were written, it was a ritual. A few hundred years later, it was a legend that the History Channel and a video game would teach to millions of people as real Viking history. You're still face down in the dirt. The knife is still on your spine. But which version is actually about to happen to you? The real fast anatomical one? Or the impossible poetic one? Depends entirely on who's telling the story afterward. Flaying, Assyrian Empire. Imagine you're a rebel leader in Assyria around 870 BC. Your village refused to pay tribute to King Ashurnasirpal II. You organized the refusal. Now the army has arrived. The rebellion has failed, and his soldiers have dragged you directly to the king. Ashurnasirpal conquered people and documented it. His palace walls at Nimrud were covered in stone carvings of his campaigns and his treatment of enemies, with inscriptions stating plainly that he did it to terrify anyone thinking about resistance, and his preferred method of advertising was flaying, arguably the most psychologically terrifying method of execution ever devised, because it explicitly targets the human body's largest, most sensitive sensory organ. Flaying is a slow, agonizingly precise surgical procedure that requires immense anatomical skill. If the executioner is too reckless, the victim will bleed out or go into shock too early, ruining the public spectacle. To prevent that, the king's executioners avoid a chaotic act of rage. They bind you tightly in a star shape before the crowd. Using a small, razor-sharp curved knife, they make long, strategic incisions. They start at your fingertips and toes, working methodically inward toward the torso. This calculated approach leaves your chest and head untouched for as long as possible, keeping you conscious and functional deep into the procedure, unable to do anything about what is happening. The human body cannot survive without its skin, but death is rarely instant. Skin acts as our primary thermostat, trapping heat and regulating body temperature. Once the blade slowly peels your skin back in a single intact sheet, you are left as a raw mass of exposed muscle and nerves. Even on a blazing hot day in the Assyrian desert, your core temperature drops rapidly, and you begin shivering violently. If the overwhelming trauma and shock don't shut your heart down first, a massive systemic infection will finish the job over the coming days. But your outer shell doesn't wait for you to die. The harvested skin is immediately put to work, stretched across the city gates, or nailed to a pillar directly in front of your eyes. Every traveling merchant and neighboring village within 500 miles gets the message. This is what organizing against the empire looks like. Historians note that Ashurnasirpal's inscriptions describe these flayings in exactly the same tone as his descriptions of successful crop harvests. Clinical facts about how the king maintained order in his world. Decimation, ancient Rome. You're a Roman soldier. Yesterday, in battle, your unit broke and ran. The whole unit, hundreds of you. Today, you've been ordered to assemble back at camp in full formation, and you already know what that means. You've heard the stories. A commander steps forward. He confirms what the rumor said. Your cohort, all 500 of you, has been condemned to decimation. Then he tells you the rules. You will be divided into groups of 10. Within each group, the men will draw lots. Whichever man draws the unlucky lot is condemned to die. And it won't be the commander, or an executioner, or some hooded stranger who kills him. The other 9 men in his group will, with clubs, with stones, with whatever's at hand. If they refuse, they'll be killed too. The word for what's about to happen comes from the Latin for removal of a tenth. The math is simple. The math is brutal. Out of every 10 of you, 1 will be dead by sundown, killed by the other 9. They begin the count. The first group steps forward. You watch. Now, imagine you're standing in your group of 10. The straws are passed around. You take 1. You don't look at it yet. You look at the faces of the 9 men around you. Men you've shared a tent with, eaten with, fought beside for months. In some cases, years. One of you is about to die. The other 9 are about to kill him. You look down at your hand. That's the punishment. The execution itself almost isn't the point. The point is that every soldier who survives the day has personally beaten a comrade to death by the random luck of the draw. That guilt is now permanent. That shared trauma is now the glue that will hold the unit together forever. Because next time you think about breaking and running, you'll remember the man in your group who didn't pick the right straw, and the weight of him going still under your club. You will not break next time. The survivors aren't even let off easy. They're often kicked out of the camp's safe zone, made to sleep outside in the open, and fed cheap barley instead of the normal wheat ration, a public mark of shame everyone can see. The most famous user of decimation was the general Crassus. During the war against the rebel slave army of Spartacus, he decimated his own troops to scare them back into fighting shape, and it apparently worked. Mark Antony used it after a defeat by the Parthians. There's even a story of a Christian unit called the Theban Legion being decimated again and again in 286 AD when they refused orders, until the entire unit was gone. Here's the interesting modern footnote. Historians who've looked closely now think decimation was actually pretty rare in practice, and that the Romans themselves talked about it far more than they actually did it. It was less a regular tool and more a legendary threat, the kind of thing officers brought up in speeches to keep men in line. The fear of it was doing most of the work. Sawing, ancient Persia. They're holding you upside down. Your ankles are tied apart to a wooden frame above you, holding your legs spread. Your head is pointing at the ground. The world is upside down, and the blood is already pooling in your face, making your head feel heavy and your eyes feel pressurized. The heart is pounding in your temples. Two men stand on either side of you, holding a long, two-handled saw between them. They place the teeth of it against you, between your legs. Then they start to pull. Here's the part that should chill you. The upside-down position isn't an accident. It isn't laziness. It's a deliberate, cold engineering choice. And someone, somewhere, figured it out on purpose. When a body suffers a massive injury and starts losing blood, the blood pressure crashes. The brain stops getting enough oxygen, and the person quickly passes out and dies. That's actually a kind of mercy. The body shuts the lights off so you don't have to be present for the worst of it. But hanging upside down sabotages that mercy. With gravity pulling all your blood toward your head, your brain keeps getting a steady supply of oxygen even as your body is now being opened up and bleeding out. So you stay awake, you stay aware. You feel everything far longer than you ever would if they just laid you flat. The executioners discovered they could saw all the way down to your abdomen before you finally lost consciousness, simply because the upside-down position kept your brain alive long enough to feel it. That's the part that should sit with you, not the act itself. The cold problem-solving behind the position. Somebody, at some point in history, asked the question, how do we keep them awake longer? And worked out the answer. History gives us a few names attached to this. Early Christian tradition says the apostle Simon the Zealot was martyred this way in Persia, hung upside down and sawn from the groin downward. There's a horrifying record from Morocco in 1705 of an official named Melek, condemned for rebellion, who was sawn in half exactly this way. A witness recorded that Melek was still awake and aware even when the saw had reached his belly. At that point, executioners pulled the saw out, repositioned it at his skull, and started sawing down from the top to meet the cut from below. The good news, if there is any, is that this method was always rare, even in the places that used it. And like several others on this list, the most extreme accounts may have been exaggerated over the centuries. But the underlying logic, the deliberate decision to invert a body for the purpose of stretching consciousness, tells you something permanent about what humans are capable of designing once they let themselves. The Brazen Bull, ancient Greece. You're being marched up to it now. The bull is huge, life-sized, made entirely of bronze, standing on a heavy stone pedestal. It looks too solid, too still, like a statue. But there's a door on its side, hinged open, and underneath the pedestal, men are stacking firewood. They lead you up the steps. They push you toward the open door. You see the hollow inside, walls slightly curved to fit the shape of the bull. You step in. The door swings shut behind you and you hear it lock. Then nothing happens for a while. You can hear the crowd outside, muffled. You can smell wood smoke beginning to drift up through the floor. The metal is still cool against your back, but then the floor starts to feel warm, then a little warmer. Then the warm becomes hot. Then the metal you're standing on isn't a floor anymore. It's a frying pan, and the walls around you aren't walls. They're an oven. You try to lift your feet, but there's nowhere to lift them to. You try to press yourself against a corner away from the hottest spot. Every surface is becoming the same temperature. Here's what's actually happening to you. Metal is an extraordinary conductor of heat. As the fire below heats the bronze, every surface inside the bull rises in temperature, almost evenly. Your skin starts burning wherever it touches metal, which is everywhere. The air inside the chamber heats too. It's now hotter than boiling, and when you try to breathe in, you're inhaling air that's literally cooking the inside of your lungs. Your body's cooling system, sweat, can't help you when the air around you is hotter than the inside of you. You scream, and here's where the inventor of this thing added his special touch. The man who built the Brazen Bull, a craftsman named Perillus, designed a network of pipes and tubes connecting the inside of the bull to its nostrils. So when you scream, the sound travels up through those pipes, gets distorted along the way, and comes bellowing out of the bull's nose, sounding exactly like an angry, snorting bull. To the crowd watching outside, the metal beast itself appears to be alive and roaring. Your death has been turned into a performance for them. The bull was built for a Greek tyrant named Phalaris around 570 BC. According to the ancient historian Diodorus, when Perillus proudly demonstrated his invention to Phalaris and explained the screaming pipes feature, Phalaris was either disgusted or delighted. Either way, he told Perillus to climb inside and show him exactly how the screams would sound through the pipes. The moment Perillus was inside, Phalaris locked the door and lit the fire. The very first victim of the Brazen Bull was the man who built it. The story has one more layer. Legends say that years later, when Phalaris himself was finally overthrown, the people he'd tyrannized executed him in the very same bull. The device killed its creator, and then it killed its owner. Whether the Brazen Bull was real at all is debated. The story is famous and ancient, mentioned by many writers, but no Brazen Bull has ever been found. Building one was technically possible. Whether it ever actually roared is something we may never know. But you can hear it anyway, can't you? Even just from hearing it. That's the trick every story in this list is playing on you.